the one thing that we are going to do today is going to be very interesting, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to do database handling. So like I told you guys earlier that when we used to read files from the CSV or Excel, then we were not actually reading the files or the data from our databases, right? What we were doing is we were reading data from flat files, data which is stored inside a file. And at that point in time, we were wondering if there is a way where we can read the data from the database. Because what happens in case of a real life project is most of the times you will have to read data which is actually stored in the database, right? So this is what we are going to do today. We are going to do our analysis the way we did using library pandas, right? But then instead of reading the data from CSV, we are going to read the data from a database table, right? And some of the things that we are going to do today are like these, right? So we are going to establish a connection to the database, then we are going to create a table, we are going to insert values in the table, we are going to select the values from the table, and then we are going to look at some of the other ways in which we can query, right? So we can use a where clause to filter, we can use a order by clause to actually order or sort the data in any specific order, be it ascending or descending. So these are the things that we are going to look at today. Now, what I have done is there is a prerequisite to this, right? When we were trying to connect or read data from a CSV file, then what is it that we needed? We needed the CSV file. Pretty simple, right? When we wanted to read data from an Excel file, then we needed the Excel file, right? And what is the syntax that we used? Read underscore CSV and read underscore XLS, right? Read underscore Excel. So that is the syntax that we used. Now, the thing is that if you really want to do this, which is database handling, then we need a database server and we need a database, right? We need a database. Unless and until we have a database for ourselves, then we cannot connect to that database, right? So the first thing that we should do is we should have a database for ourselves. So what I am trying to do is, and this is going to be a prerequisite. So some of the installations that we will need to do is, and to keep the installation simple for everyone, and what I have done is I have picked a product which is otherwise available for free. So what is it that we are trying to do? We are trying to install MySQL, right? Where is this MySQL? MySQL is a pretty light database which is available, and this is a it has a free version available, a community version available as well, which we all can download and install in our local machines, and then we can continue to use it. There won't be any problem. And this is going to be more than enough for your home usage, or or your academic usage, or anything that you want to explore on your own, on your local machine. This is going to be good enough. So we are going to be installing this, right? So we need to have a MySQL installed on our local machine. This is the first prerequisite. The other prerequisite is we will need to also have some of the drivers installed. And one of the drivers that we need to have is the MySQL connector. Now, the good thing is that you do not need to worry about MySQL, installing the MySQL connector separately. What you need is you can just install MySQL and then you will be done, right? So what are the things that you need, right? Let me just summarize and then we can go ahead with this. So to do database handling, what are the prerequisites? Database handling prerequisites. What is it that we need? We need, first of all, a database server. We need a database server. Now, what is the database server that we are taking? You can take anything, right? You can install Oracle, you can install SQL Server, you can install Postgres, right? You can install MySQL, right? etc. So you can pick any of these. You can pick any of these. The easiest of all is going to be either Postgres or MySQL. The commands, the syntax is pretty much like SQL in all of these, so you don't have to worry about which to pick. But then if you really want to, do things really quickly and not worry about a lot of things, then I think MySQL works the best for you. And this is the example that I'm going to take today as well. So that is, yeah, tell me. We can, we can, yes. You you can do that, right? The thing is you will need to have access. So you can connect to Snowflake as well. That is not a problem. The only thing is how do I demonstrate this? For connecting to MySQL, I can install a local MySQL database, which I'm going to do today. But if you want to connect to Snowflake, then you need to have Snowflake available with you, right? You'll need to have an account with them, right? And if they allow you a trial account, then you can do a 14-day trial, and during those 14 days you can do whatsoever using that instance. But after that, it will be gone forever. It will be gone forever. It won't be available for you forever. With MySQL, what will happen is it will continue to be installed on your local machine, and then you can continue to use it forever. Yeah, if you have a Snowflake account, then you can continue to use it. The only thing which is going to change it, so what did I say? I said that database server, you have a choice, right? You can go with any of these, right? If you have AWS Redshift account, you can go with that as well, right? The examples that I took were the on-prem servers. You can go with cloud versions of the database servers as well. You can pick these as well. The only thing which is going to change is the drivers. So if you need to connect to Oracle, then you need the driver for Oracle. If you need to connect to SQL Server, then the driver for SQL Server is going to be different. Same ways, if you need to connect to Snowflake, then you need to have the Snowflake driver, right? And that is the second point. Connector for the database. And this is, I'm not going to name anything here. Every database will have a different connector. Think of that as a software. If you need to connect with Postgres, then there is a different driver. If you need to connect with MySQL, there's a different driver. If you need to connect with Snowflake, you need a different driver. So the choice is yours. You can pick any database, and you will also need to have the connector installed as well. So let me help you figure out how to do this for MySQL, and then we can find out how to actually use it, right? So the first thing that you need to do is install MySQL. Where do we get MySQL, right? So this is the path I've specified. If you go to this path, this is where you will find the installer. So based on what your operating system is, I'm assuming this to be my Microsoft Windows. You can pick either of these. Eventually, it will be better if you pick this one, 427.6 MB file. Download it, and the installation is pretty simple. You just have to do, keep selecting your default options, do next, 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 right? At the end of it, MySQL is going to get installed on your local machine. Why I'm asking this installer is the bigger one, because if you do this, then it will to take care of everything that you need, right? It will not just install MySQL, which is this, it will also install your MySQL connector, and not just MySQL connector, a few other connectors as well for Python. And you don't have to worry about installing it separately, right? So what are the other things that you need, right? Uh, how do you install it? I think it is clear, right? You just download this file. You just download this file from here. You will need to create a login here. This is a free account. You can just create a login and then download this file, and then no thanks, just start my download. Okay, so looks like they have also given you an option to skip this process. So see, my 428 MB of download has started, and once this is done, which is which is looking like it is going to be very quick. Yeah. So once this is done, you just open this setup. So it will automatically detect that I already have it installed. So this is definitely not going to work for me, but when you run this setup on your local machine, then this is going to walk you through the whole installation wizard, where you can actually go ahead and install it, right? So let's see what is the option that it gives me. So it actually identified that I have a MySQL server instance running, and I will need to first stop it before I move ahead with the setup process. So I'm not going to install it because I already have it. I just want to let you guys know how to actually start the setup, and just move ahead with the default options, whatever it shows you, and then MySQL is going to get installed, right? It is as simple as, if you have ever installed any software, Windows-based software on your machine, the setup is going to be pretty much similar. It is not going to be any different, right? So continue with that, and with that, if you have everything set up correctly, then you should have these two installed on your machines, right? MySQL Shell and MySQL Workbench, right? Depending on the version, it will be 8.0 or something else. But then these are the two things which will be available in your machine after this installation is done. Now, we will be using MySQL Workbench, of course, but then there are a few other things which I will need to. So MySQL Shell and MySQL Workbench, right? So let me just specify it here. Uh, this, so that you can actually check installer installs the following onto local machine, right? So what is the first thing? My SQL Shell and MySQL Workbench. So these are the two things that it installs, right? And this is very important, and that is why I'm mentioning all of this here, so that you know, right? So install MySQL. How? You have the installer here, download and run the setup process. Once that is done, you'll need to check that you have MySQL and MySQL Workbench installed on your local machine. So with this, what will be available? You will have a database server available in your local system, right? How do I check? How do I check if I have a local database server running on my machine or not, right? So that is a very important step, right? In your tasks panel, right, you will have this icon. And if you look at the tooltip, it says MySQL notifier, monitoring one services and zero instances. If you see this red play, sorry, green play button, if it is green, then it means that there is a database running on my local machine. So that is one way of figuring out that you have MySQL installed and running on your machine or not. That is one. The second option is that you can go to the MySQL Workbench, just open it, right? You will have a local instance available here. What I will do is I'll just open this, and if you look at it, it is showing you the different databases, right? Sys database, World database, Sakila database, and Python database, right? These are four databases. You also have these tables, right? So Python database has a customer table. When you do select rows limit 1,000, then it is actually showing you all the values in that. So this in itself is good enough for me to assume that there is a local database which is running on my system, right? And the other ways, so the first way is MySQL Workbench, from which you can actually look at these schema and table structures. And from here, if you look at it, you will have a instance which is running here. When you right click on this, it says MySQL 80 running. I have the option of stopping it or restarting it. I can do whatsoever from here. I can stop the database server. I can restart the database server. If it is stopped, then I can start this as well. You also have this option of manage instance, right? So let's see what happens when we look at this. See, there is a very there are a few set of very important information which we need to have in order to be able to connect establishment, right? So I need to know the host name, right? This is nothing but my computer name, right? Whatever my computer name is, that becomes my host name. And if you look at the socket, it says MySQL. The port number is very important, 3306, right? So the two things which are very important is for me to know the host name and for me to know the port name. These are going to be helpful for me to actually be able to connect to this database programmatically, right? Which is what we are going to do. Because when you connect to your database programmatically, then you'll need to know where your database is. And these are the parameters which lets you identify where your database is. What is the name of the database? So you can think of this as the name of the database server. My SQL Server instance name is desktop-hitcam n. That is what the name is. So if I go back to this Python notebook, see what it says, right? It says create a new user account. So after installation, right? After installation, we will need to create a new user account in MySQL. It by default creates a few usernames, but then we need to create one, and we will see how to create them. The other thing is, in order to establish a connection with MySQL, note down the following details about the MySQL instance. This is important. I need to know the host name. So what is my host name? My host name is desktop hitcam n, right? So my desktop hitcam n, right? This is my host name, right? Okay, username. Now this is something that we will need to create, right? We will see how to create this. Username is our choice, password is our choice, right? And database name is also our choice, right? So let's see what the database is. So all of these are databases, right? I can connect to either of these, Python, Shakila, Sys, and World. I can connect with any of these. So the choice is ours. The only thing that we need to figure out is that these what are the databases which are available. So I can connect to this is a custom database which I had created named Python, and I can connect to this as well. So let's assume that we are going to connect with Python. Okay, what is the username and password, right? So I'll I have already created a username password, but then I'll show you guys how to create one as well, right? So when you go to from schemas, when you go to administration, you will have users and privileges, right? And this is where all my users are residing. So by default, the administrative user, the admin user is called root, right? And what is the other user which I have created? I've created another user, Python underscore user. And I can set the password here for this user as well. So how can you create a new account? I can create a new account, right? New user by clicking on this add account, right? I can leave the name as new user, or I can change it to new underscore user. I can provide the password as well. So new underscore user, new underscore user. So I'm leaving both of these as the same. And see, I have a new user added here. The name of the user is new underscore user. So let's note it down here, right? Because we definitely need this. So we have created a new user, new underscore user. The password for the new user is also new user. What do you do when you connect to the database? You connect to a specific database server. So that is the name of the server. You need to have a username and password. Exactly. That's the way how it is going to be in the in the Python code as well. You will need to specify the username and password through which you will be connecting, and which is the database that you will be connecting to. Because when you look at this workbench, right? When you look at the workbench in the schema view, there are four databases. So which database you want to connect to? That is what is very important, right? So, okay, that is what is very important. So what I will need to do is I will need to actually note all of these down, because these are the connection parameters which I will need to use. So we have seen how to create a new user, right? Let me put down the steps so that you can actually remember. So go to administration, right? Go to administration, users and privileges. So first thing that you'll need to go to is MySQL Workbench, then administration. Okay, and then go to users and privileges. Users and privileges, right? And then what did we do? Add account, right? This is what we had done, add account. So add account. Then do what? Change username, specify password, and hit apply, right? Clear? So when you do this, then your new user is created. Your new user is created, right? And then you can note down the name of the user. Okay. Any questions so far? Because these are my prerequisites. Once all of these are done, then we can actually go ahead and start using this database as my connection. I can connect to this database and read data from the database. Any questions so far? No? Okay, all right. So now a few other things, right, that we did not look at. Let's look at them now, right? So when I said there are two prerequisites, right? There are two prerequisites. One is the database server, which we have now. The other one is the drivers, the connector for the database, right? So let's see if we have the Python connector for MySQL or not, right? Because what we want to do, I want to connect from Python to MySQL, right? So what do we need? For connecting MySQL, so what do we need to do? We need to connect Python to MySQL. So what do we need? Python connector for MySQL. This is what we need specifically. So we will need to check if we have it installed on our machine or not. So let's see. How do we check? So we will go to programs and features, right? And here just type MySQL and see what all things do we have. Do we have a Python connector or not? So see, MySQL connector Python version 8. So this is exactly what we needed, and we have it already installed. Why is this already installed? Because I told you in the very beginning, right? If you download this file, if you download this file for 27.6 MB file, it is going to install everything for you. You don't need to worry about it later. And this is what is happening. All of these drivers. So it installed MS SQL Server, sorry, MySQL Server. It installed MySQL Shell. It installed MySQL Workbench, and then a lot of other things as well, right? And these are connectors, right? MySQL connector for ODBC, MySQL connector for .NET, MySQL connector for Python, MySQL connector for C++ and stuff like that, right? I think this is the JDBC one. So you don't need to worry about installing the drivers separately. So just know that once you install the bigger package, it will install the Python package as well, and you don't need to worry about it, right? So what should we do? Let's start using this connector, right? Let's start using this connector. So how do you use the connector? You will need to first import this, right? And the command is very simple: import mysql.connector. So I just executed it. Of course, there is going to be no Nothing printed. I did not get any error, which means my SQL connector is imported successfully. Now, when you connect to a database, you need to specify these parameters, right? What is the host? What is the database server name? What is the username? What is the password? And what is the database? So what is it that we are trying to do? We are trying to connect to this database named Python. We are going to connect to this database named Python, and we will see what all things we can do, right? So for this, we need a username. We have used another user here, Python underscore user, which I had already created. And the password is also the same. This is my database server name, and this is the database name. So these are the four parameters that we'll need to set. And once that is done, we actually, what is it that we are trying to do? We are trying to create a connection parameter for connecting to MySQL. That is it. Whenever we connect to MySQL, we need to specify these four parameters: hostname, username, password, and database. Okay, so this is done as well. Now, what do I do? I need to now open a connection to the MySQL, right? So that I can actually do whatever we want with the database. So open a connection to the MySQL. How did I do this? So I defined a variable myCursor is equal to mydb. Now what is mydb? Mydb is equal to these parameters, right? Which means we established a connection with MySQL and using these parameters. What is the host name? The server which is running locally on my machine, and these are the username, password, and database. So when I write this syntax mydb.cursor, I'm opening a connection to the MySQL server which is running on my local machine. Now, why is this important? This is important that in a sense that once we have established a connection, then we can read or write data from the database. So this is the syntax for opening the connection. So I have opened a connection. Now, if you guys are familiar with SQL, then we can execute any SQL statement from Python itself, and this is going to get executed in this database server, in this database, Python database inside this database, desktop dash hitcam n. So what are we trying to do? We are trying to create table. The name of the table is going to be customers, and we are going to just define this as a very simple table: name varchar 255, address varchar 255, which means this table is going to contain just two fields, name and address, and both are varchars, right, variable characters, and the maximum length can be 255 characters. So let's execute and see what happens. So I've got an error, right? Let's read through this error. What does it say? It says table customers already exist. Okay, what does it mean? Am I able to establish the connection with the database or not? What do you think? What do you guys think? I'm getting an error. Table customers already exists. So let's check. Let's check, right? Let's check. Let's go to schemas. Let's refresh this. Let's look at the Python database. Let's look at the tables inside this. So we have a customers and students database tables. These are the tables, customers tables and students table. So my customers table already exists, and that is the reason I'm getting this error, right? See, table customers already exists. Why does it already exist? Because while preparing this tutorial, I have run this command already once, not just once, more than once. So that is the reason this table already exists. So one thing that you know is that when you run a command or when you execute a SQL command to create a table with a name with the same name with which it exists, then it will not let you create it again, right? So how should we resolve this? Let me just drop the table here, right? So that let me just drop the table. What is happening? Why is it not dropping? Okay, maybe because we have already established a connection and that could be the reason. Wait. So in that case, let's do one thing to resolve this error. Let's change the name of the table itself, right? So that there is no conflict. But one thing that you already learned is that if you have a table already available, then you cannot create it again, right? You either need to drop the table or you will need to uh, use a different table name. So let's use a different table name. Okay, so now this time there is no error. I have created a table named customer with two fields, name and address. So let's see if it is created or not. So let me refresh this. Something weird is happening for sure. Yeah, something weird is happening in this instance. So now we have a customer table, right? This is a table we created, right? What are the columns? There is a name column and there is a address column, right? Let's try to select and see if there is anything in there or not. So if you look at the table, there is nothing in there, right? Why is there nothing in there? Because we have just created this table. It has got nothing inside it. So we are able to create a table programmatically from Python into my MySQL database, right? Okay, let's do one thing. Let's add records to this table and see what happens. So to add record again, we'll need to do the same, right? My cursor.execute, and then you can write almost each and every SQL statement there. The way we created table using my cursor.execute, the same ways we can do insert into customers. Our table name is customer now. So insert into customer values and then specify the name value and then specify the address value. Once you do that, you will need to actually do mydb.commit and that is going to write the values to the database. So what is it that I'm expecting now? I'm expecting that I will have one row where the name will be Amit and then the address will be Bangalore. So let's go and check. So I'm just going to execute this again and see. My database has these new entries. So what is happening here? I'm able to programmatically create this table first and then while creating the table, I defined two fields, name and address. And now I'm able to programmatically insert values in the table as well. Cool, right? And this is primarily what is the basic, right? And going forward, you can do anything that you want, right? So what you can do here is, uh, let's look at another execute statement, right? What are we trying to do here? Now we are trying to insert another row, right? Insert into customer values Rajesh and Delhi. And then we are going to do mydb.commit. So let's see what is happening here. We executed it. No, nothing gets printed, of course, but then we'll need to go and check what is happening here. So let's see. Yeah, the second row, Rajesh and Delhi. So same ways you can, whatever values you have, you can just write or insert into the table using this insert into customer values statement. So that is how you do it. Okay. So there are two things which we have done so far. We have created a table and then we have inserted values. Now, how do we read values from the table, right? So what we will do is for reading values, we are going to take another table as an example because the table that we have created had just two rows. So let's explore a little some of the other tables and see what information they have. So there is this table which already comes by default with your installation, and that some of those tables have pretty large number of records, right? So we have this city table which has very large number of records, right? Very large number of records. So that's one thing that we can try. We can also try country, right? It has multiple columns as well, right? So if you look at the number of columns, we have We have code, city code, we have, sorry, country code, country name, continent, region, surface area, independence year, population, expectancy, GNP. I don't know what this number represents, but then we have a lot of information, right? Head of state, capital, code to a lot of columns as well as lots of rows as well, right? So I'm assuming this list could be around 160 to 180, depending on the countries that we have. And then we have country language. Now, this one does not have a lot of columns, but then it has lots of rows as well. So I think selecting country is going to be a better choice because it has many columns as well as many rows in them as well, right? So let's try and read or select from this table. Now, we will need to be very sure where this table resides. The name of the table is country and the name of the database is world, right? So the statement for reading data from this becomes select star from world dot country, right? Database name dot table name. So let's see how we can do this. So if you look at it here, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to now define the same connection parameters again. Why is that so? The reason for me to define the same connection parameters again is because earlier when we defined the connection parameters, I was trying to connect to the database named Python. But now we have chosen another database. We have chosen to connect to world database and table name country, right? Which means we will need to change the connection parameters. Is my host going to change? No, the host is still the same. The database server is still the same. Is my user changing? No, the user and the password is still the same. The only thing which is changing is the database. And that is why we will need to define this again. We will need to fetch the cursor again, mydb.cursor. So let's do that. So done. No errors, which means it ran successfully. Now, what do we do? Now, the table that we want to connect with is country, right? So select star from country and limit 5. Now, why are we doing a limit 5? When you do limit 5, then actually we are selecting the top 5 rows only. In total, we may have 160 to 180 rows, but then we do not want to select all of them. We just want to show or select the top 5. So did that. And how do we print? So think of this as a list now. My cursor is kind of a list, and we can iterate through this. And how we can iterate? For x in my cursor, print x. So how many values my cursor will have? How many rows of values my cursor will have? It will have 5 rows of values because we have selected 5 rows, right? Select start from country, limit 5. So what is going to happen here is this for loop is going to run 5 times, and first time it will have values for the first row, second time it will have values for the second row, and likewise. And that ways it will print all of these values. This is, I'm just printing a new line character so that we have some space to segregate the 2 rows, right? Okay, so what is happening, right? If you look at it, this is my first record, this is my second record, third record, fourth record, and fifth record. Let's go and check, right? Is my first country Aruba? Sorry, is my first country Aruba? So we'll need to check, right? So how do we check? See, ABW, Aruba is the first country. What is my second country? Afghanistan. Third one is Angola, right? So my second country is Afghanistan. The third one is Angola. So this is actually fetching all of these values correctly. Where are these values coming from? And this is a different kind of a transaction, right? Earlier, when we created the table, we were writing or passing on some instructions from the Python code, and the change was happening on the database end. When we inserted records, all of these values went inside the database. Now this is the opposite of it, right? What we are trying to do is we are trying to read data from the database. So now the data is, you can think of this as an incoming data, right? This is an incoming data. We are reading data from the database and we are processing this into Python. So this is my top 5 records from the country table. Can I do top two? Yes, you can do top two. You can just change this number to limit two, and then see, we only have two records. Can I do top 25? Yes, you can do top 25. Just change the number here, and then you can print the top 25 records. So this is very much customizable. For simplicity's sake, I'm just leaving this to limit 5. Okay, what are the other things that you can do? So anything and everything that you can do inside SQL, you can write just all of these commands here, and this is just going to work, right? Okay, how? Let's see. So I do not want all of these columns, right? I want to filter my columns. I do not want all of these columns. I just want name and I want life expectancy. I just need these two columns. That is it. I need name column and life expectancy. So how do I do this? Select and specify. Instead of specifying star, which means all the columns, I can specify just the fields that you want to select. So select name, comma, life expectancy. So what will this do? It will only select the this column, the name column and life expectancy, right? From which table? From country. Now we have specified a where clause, right? Where life expectancy is greater than 70. So what will this do? What will this do? Where life expectancy is greater than 70. So it will only give you those records where the life expectancy value is greater than 70. So we have this record will show up, this record will show up, this will show up, this will show up, this will show up, this will show up, right? And what is not going to show up? So this record will not appear. This is not greater than 70. So this will not appear. This is not greater than 70. So Angola is not going to come up as well, right? So let's see what happens. What are we trying to do? We are trying to do filtering, right? So let me specify here filtering data, right? What are we trying to filter? We only want to filter in data where life expectancy is greater than 70. So I ran this command. This ran successfully. There is no error. And now let's look at the outcome. So we have Bahamas. No, let's start from the top. So we have Aruba. We have Australia, Albania, Andorra, Netherlands, UAE. All of these have life expectancy greater than 70, and that is why all of these are showing up here, right? Let's change this to 80 and see. When you change this to 80, now only 5 countries are showing up here, right? Only 5 countries are showing up here, right? If you want to check that, then what we can do is we can go here and then actually sort these values and see, right? Before above 80, there are only 5 countries, right? Singapore, Japan, San Marino, Macau, and Andorra. And these are the values that we see here. Singapore, Japan, Macau, San Marino, and Andorra, right? So this is working fine, right? This is working fine. Instead, right, one thing that you can do is you can just copy paste this statement and run it here, right, in your MySQL Workbench. If you do that, then what happened? Okay, so here we will need to specify world dot country. See the same outcome. These 5 records are showing up here, and that is exactly what I'm getting in Python as well. Any questions, guys, so far? Are you able to understand how the transactions are happening between Python and my MySQL database? Guys, any questions? Okay, right. So I'm assuming that things are clear, right? So, okay. So now you can do anything, right? So what we have done now is we have tried to select the top 5 records, right? And that way you can change it to 25, 30, 50. You can, if you remove this, then actually you're selecting everything, right? So when you do this, then this is going to show you all the records, right? So that is something that you can do as well. If you want to filter out, you have the where clause. You can just, use that as well. And what you can also do is there is this order by clause, right? So order by is used to do sorting, right? So let me change it to 80. It is the same command as above, but then I'm adding order by. So order by life expectancy descending, which means, you know, whatever results come out of this select statement, you show me the life expectancy values sorted in descending order, right? So when you do that, then see what is happening. These are my 5 records which were showing up earlier, but now with the group by clause, these are arranged in a descending order of life expectancy. So Singapore is down below, right? But if you look at the earlier outcome, it was sorted on name of the country. It was sorted on the name of the country, but now it is sorted on the descending order of life expectancy. So depending on how you want these records to be arranged, you can use order by as well. If you want to change this to ascending, you can do ascending as well. So ASC is ascending, DESC is descending, right? It's the same command that you run there. Now here is ascending order of life expectancy. Okay, all right. So pretty much anything that you can do in SQL is what you can do using this Python connector for MySQL. And that is how it is going to work. Uh, Important thing, right? Now you must be wondering, right? What do I do? This looks like a tuple, right? This looks like a tuple. Every record is a tuple, right? Not even this, right? If you look at the earlier ones, right? These all are tuples, right? So a row stored as tuple is okay. I'm able to fetch the data from the database, but then what do I do? If I need to analyze this data, then I need all of this data arranged into rows and columns, right? That makes more sense because this is where if you select these values as rows and columns, that is where I can use pandas or any other library to do my analysis, right? So I should be able to use this as a data frame, right? A pandas data frame. Now, how do I do that? And that is going to be very interesting, right? And very simple as well. So for that, what we will do is the syntax is going to change a little. Remember, we used to do read underscore CSV. We used to do read underscore Excel. The same ways we can do read underscore SQL as well. Read underscore SQL. And it's going to be very simple, right? This is a reiteration, right? We have already imported MySQL.connector, but I'm importing it again so that for you to be able to import data from SQL and store this into a data frame, you should have all the code at one place, right? So let's see how you can do this. The first two steps are very simple. Since you are importing data from reading data from MySQL, you need the MySQL connector. So I have this imported. You want to read the data into pandas data frame, so you need to import pandas as well. Now the steps are very simple. You first need to connect to the database, for which you need to specify the connection parameters. So what are my connection parameters? The host name, right? The database server name, we already know, we have already used it. What is my database? We already know. World is what we are trying to connect to. And then the username and password, right? These are not new to us. So we can just specify these parameters in SQL.connect. And then what do we do? All so far, right, we have been doing df is equal to pd dot read underscore csv, right? This is what we have been doing. But then instead of csv, what we can do is we can do read SQL, right? And then we will specify, first thing that we need to specify is what is the database connection? Where is the database connection? So database connection is equal to db underscore connection, right? And what is my db connection? I'm specifying that this is my database where we need to connect to. So username, password, database, and host. So it is going to, when you do a read SQL, it needs connection as well. Which database connection you want to read from? So I want to read from DB underscore connection. And what is the query that you want to run? I want to run this query. Select star from country, limit 10. So let's run this and see what happens. So I ran this, and of course nothing is going to happen because I'm not printing anything. But what has happened actually? This statement has executed. Select star from country, limit 10, and this has got stored into df. Now what is my df? Df is my pandas data frame. So when you print df, what is going to happen? See, all of my data which I have read from the database, MySQL database, all of them has gotten stored as a pandas data frame. Now this is very powerful, right? And this is very beautiful as well. You can actually do whatsoever with this database table going forward. Now what are the things that we do? Df dot head, right? Df dot head 5. You can do this, right? So all of this data from the database has come to our data frame, and now you can do whatever you want. Df dot shape, right? So 10 by 15, we have selected only top 10 rows, right? We have only selected top 10 rows, and there are 15 columns in there. So it is showing 10 dot 10 comma 15. Df dot describe, right? So all of this is going to be easy now. Once you have read the data into the pandas data frame, then you can run any pandas data frame to do your whatever analysis that you want to do. Any questions, guys, with how we are reading the data from SQL and putting this inside a data frame, pandas data frame? So let me just extend this, right? Let me just remove this limit right from here, and then let me just run this again. So when you run this, then see, it is going to actually show you read all the data, right? So 239 rows into 15 columns. Now it will make sense to read the top 5. And when you do shape, then this is 239 records, 15 columns. And when you do describe, then this is of course going to include many more values in there as well. So that was it, guys. Primarily, what you can do is you can just explore more on this and then try changing these statements for yourself and see how they execute. The in terms of what is important for you is to get this installation done correctly. For you to be able to do this all on your own, you will need to make sure that you have all of this installation done correctly. And once that is done, you can actually just run this notebook, because if you run the same installer, then one thing is a guarantee that you will have all of these tables, right, available with you. You will have world, dot city, country, and country languages. And with that, you will be able to actually read all of this on your own as well. So any questions, guys? If not, then this is what it is for today. This is going to be very interesting, and you should, when you run this on your own, I think you're going to pretty much like it as well as to how we are actually able to connect with a database server. In terms of Gangesh, when you asked if we can connect to Snowflake, yes, you will need to connect to Snowflake. This is absolutely going to work. If you The only thing that you will need to change is now, since you are trying to connect Python to Snowflake, then you need a different driver, right? What you need is a Snowflake connector for Python. This is what you need. You need Snowflake connector for Python. Right now, we are using Python connector for MySQL. So every database will have a separate connector. That's what I wanted to highlight here. AWS Redshift will have a different connector. Snowflake will have a different connector. MySQL is what we have used today. So you will need to make sure that you have this connector installed successfully. So when you and you will find it on the Snowflake website as well, right? This is not going to be very difficult. You just search for it, Snowflake connector for Python, and you will have it. So yeah, using the Python connector, installing the Python connector. So you can just refer to this guide, and this is going to actually tell you where to get it from, right? So 3.5, if you want to install it for 3.5, then these are the steps. And yeah, so install the connector. So these are the steps. You just follow these steps using pandas data frame with the Python connector. So basically you need to install this. You can also install this using the pip command, right? So pip install Snowflake connector Python, right? How do you do this? Uh, ins Open Anaconda prompt, this one, open Anaconda prompt and just write this command. You can just copy paste this command. Just write this command. Pip install upgrade Snowflake connector Python. So once you do that, this is going to install the Python connector, sorry, Snowflake connector for Python. And this will at max take a minute or two. And once this is done, you will be able to use your Snowflake connector as well. So that is a prerequisite that you will need to complete. That is definitely a prerequisite. But the other thing that you'll need to change in your code is, right? So see, this is successfully installed, right? So installation is not a problem. You just need to make sure that you have the correct library installed there. So this is done. But then the other thing that you need to make sure is you need to know where the host is. You need to know the Snowflake username, password, and database. You need to change all of these. Apart from this, nothing is going to change. Yeah. Apart, apart from this, nothing is going to change. The only thing that you need to change here is now the connector is going to be different, right? Import MySQL dot connector is not going to be required here. It will need to be Snowflake connector. And here, what you'll need to do is you'll need to change the host name. So if it is not a local, of course, Cloud Data Warehouse is definitely not locally installed. So in this case, what we will need to do is you will need to specify the URL of the installation where the server is hosted. The username, password, and database will pretty much be the same, but then this may become a URL, and that is the one change that you'll need to do. So the connection parameters will change for every other database, but then the concept is going to remain the same, right? You need to have a database, either an on-prem one or a cloud-based one, and then you need to have the connector for the database.